It is 2:55 in the morning of June 5th, 1942. From the bridge of the largest battleship ever built, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto transmits a single signal across the dark Pacific. Occupation of AF is cancelled. He is in command of 160 ships. He has not lost a naval battle. He has not been driven from the field. In all of modern Japanese naval history, no combined fleet commander has ever ordered a full withdrawal. Yamamoto has just become the first. To understand what brought him to that signal, the story must go back 6 weeks, to a basement in Pearl Harbor and a man in a bathrobe. By the spring of 1942, Japan had been running wild for 6 months. Malaya, the Philippines, Singapore, the Dutch East Indies, Rangoon. One after another, the dominoes had fallen. As Yamamoto had promised the emperor, he would run wild for a year. He was delivering. But Yamamoto understood something his colleagues did not, or would not. He had traveled in America. He had seen the factories, the shipyards, the industrial scale of a continent at peace. He had said before the war, clearly, that he had utterly no confidence for the second or third year. The only path to Japanese victory was to knock America out before that machine turned fully against Japan. And the only way to do that was to destroy the U.S. Pacific Fleet, specifically its aircraft carriers, which had escaped undamaged at Pearl Harbor. The carriers were the wound that would not close. Then, on April 18, 1942, 16 American B-25 bombers lifted off the deck of USS Hornet and bombed Tokyo. The raid was militarily insignificant, so its meaning was not. The Japanese home islands were not safe. The carriers that launched that raid had to be found and sunk. Yamamoto's answer is Operation MI. Midway Atoll, a speck of coral and runways in the Central Pacific, roughly equidistant between Tokyo and Pearl Harbor, will be seized. The American fleet, compelled to defend it, will sail out to fight. Nagumo's carriers will strike the atoll, cripple its defenses, and draw the Americans into the open. Yamamoto's battleships, concealed 600 miles behind the carrier force, will deliver the killing blow. He assembles the largest battle fleet ever used in the Pacific Ocean. 160 ships, 8 aircraft carriers, 400 aircraft. The plan is not subtle. It is not meant to be. Force the weaker enemy to fight, then destroy him from concealment. Now the trap is set. What Yamamoto does not know, what no one in the Imperial Japanese Navy knows, is that the trap was already sprung. Not at Midway, weeks before a single ship leaves port. In the basement of the 14th Naval District building at Pearl Harbor, Commander Joseph Rochefort leads Station Hypo, the Navy's Pacific Signals Intelligence Unit. He works in a cramped, overheated room smelling of cigarette smoke and carbon paper, surrounded by stacks of intercepted Japanese radio traffic. He has not kept regular hours since December 7th. The code his team is attacking is called JN25. Approximately 45,000 five-digit numbers, each representing a word or phrase, layered with an additive encryption table that changes with every transmission. Breaking it requires stripping the additive through mathematical analysis, then mapping the underlying vocabulary through repetition and pattern. It is slow, grinding work. By April 1942, Rochefort's team is doing it within hours of when the Japanese transmit. This is possible for one structural reason. Yamamoto's fleet is dispersed across the Pacific, and to coordinate it, he has to communicate by radio. Every order, every logistics update, every operational revision travels through the electromagnetic spectrum. Rochefort is reading it. By late April, Hypo has identified a major Japanese operation aimed at an objective designated in traffic as AF. The Americans are nearly certain AF is Midway. They need confirmation. Captain Wilfred Holmes instructs the Midway garrison to broadcast a radio message, uncoded in the open, reporting that the base's water purification system has broken down. There, within 24 hours, a Japanese intercept reports that AF was short on water. The intended target of Japan's next major offensive has just confirmed its own location to the enemy with a fake plumbing problem. Nimitz acts on it. His intelligence officer, Lieutenant Commander Edwin Layton, appears before the Pacific Fleet Staff Conference on May 27th and lays out everything: the target, the timing, the geometry. The Japanese carriers will attack on the morning of June 4th, from the northwest on a bearing of 325 degrees. They will be approximately 175 miles from Midway. They will arrive at approximately 0700 local time. Nimitz listens. He positions his 3 carriers, Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown, northeast of Midway at a map point called Point Luck. They have been waiting there for 3 weeks. Yamamoto has assembled a fleet to ambush the U.S. Pacific Fleet. The U.S. Pacific Fleet is already there, waiting to ambush him. The Kido Butai, the first carrier striking force, approaches Midway from the northwest in the final days of May. 4 fleet carriers in a rectangular screen: Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiru. 112 aircraft on ready alert. The veterans of Pearl Harbor, of Ceylon, of the Coral Sea, the finest naval air force in the Pacific. Their commander is Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo. He is 55 years old, compact and square-faced, with the bearing of a man who rose through the battleship navy. He is not an aviator. He has never been an aviator. And he commands the greatest carrier strike force in history by virtue of seniority. A surface warrior placed at the apex of a doctrine he understands imperfectly and trusts even less. Yamamoto knows this. He is quietly, persistently disappointed in Nagumo. He could not remove him without cause. Nagumo is not a reckless man. He is, in fact, the opposite: deliberate, cautious, procedural to his bones. At Pearl Harbor, he declined to launch a 3rd strike that might have crippled the fuel infrastructure the Americans needed to fight back. Yamamoto never fully forgave him for it. His caution is not cowardice. It is doctrine, internalized over a career. It is, at this particular moment in history, the wrong quality for the command he holds. Below Nagumo, in the formation, commanding Carrier Division 2 aboard Hiru, is Rear Admiral Taman Yamaguchi. He is 49, lean, sharp-featured, trained at Princeton, named for a medieval Japanese hero. He was regarded as one of the most intellectually gifted flag officers in the Imperial Japanese Navy, the man most likely to eventually succeed Yamamoto. Where Nagumo deliberates, Yamaguchi acts. Where Nagumo buys time, Yamaguchi presses. They are, in character, opposites. They are about to become the hinge point of the Pacific War. Before dawn breaks over the Kido Butai on June 4th, one more piece of the picture must be placed. Yamamoto had intelligence in the days before the battle, suggesting that American ships might be in Hawaiian waters rather than safely distant to the south. He chose not to relay it to Nagumo, preferring to maintain radio silence and protect the position of his flagship. Tokyo subsequently broadcast a warning to the fleet. Yamamoto's staff received it. They assumed Nagumo's flagship had received it too. They did not check. The inadequate antenna array aboard Akagi, a consequence of the carrier's small superstructure, had never received the message. Nagumo sails toward Midway without knowing that his own headquarters has doubts. He is flying blind. He doesn't know it. It is 0430, June 4th, 1942. The sky over the Central Pacific is dark and clear. On the flight decks of 4 carriers, aircraft are turning on their engines in the tropical pre-dawn. The rumble rises through the steel beneath the deck crew's feet. 108 aircraft, dive bombers, torpedo planes, fighters, lift off into the darkness and turn southwest toward Midway. Then waiting in the hangar decks and on the flight deck aft are the reserve aircraft. They are armed with anti-ship weapons, torpedoes and armor-piercing bombs per Yamamoto's orders. A precaution against exactly the surprise that is coming. At 0530, American PBY patrol aircraft sight the Kido Butai and broadcast the report uncoded. American carriers at Point Luck receive it. The Japanese believe they have not been detected. They have not been detected by submarines, by surface ships, but American aircraft found them at first light, and Nimitz has known the approximate bearing since May. The first Midway strike returns at 0700. The report is mixed. The base has been hit, but the airstrip is still operational. A second strike will be necessary? The returning pilots are insistent on this point. Nagumo faces a decision. Though his doctrine is clear, hold anti-ship weapons in reserve against the possibility of an American fleet engagement, but no American ships have been reported, and Midway needs to be silenced before the landing force can proceed. He orders the reserve aircraft rearmed for land attack. Torpedoes out, bombs in. It is a slow process. The weapons must be lifted physically from the aircraft, wheeled on trolleys to the elevators, lowered to the hangar decks, and replacement ordnance brought up. The crews work fast. Fast is relative when you are handling 500-kilogram bombs in enclosed spaces. The weapons being removed do not all go below. Somebody makes the decision to set them aside rather than spend the time to stow them properly. Bombs and torpedoes begin accumulating on the hangar decks. Fuel lines snake between aircraft, and 4 carrier hangar decks fill slowly, unavoidably, with the materials of their own destruction. At 0728, the message arrives. It comes from a float plane launched by the cruiser Tone. A plane that was supposed to have been in the air an hour earlier, but launched late, deviated from its assigned search path and found the American formation only now. The signal is brief and clinical. 10 ships, apparently enemy. Bearing 010 degrees, distance 240 miles from Midway. Course 150. Speed over 20 knots. Nagumo reads it twice. The men standing near him on Akagi's bridge later describe his face going completely still. Not shocked, not panicked. Motionless. And a man whose entire operational reality has just been challenged by a piece of paper, a man who built this morning on the certainty that the Americans were far away and unprepared, holding a message that says the opposite may be true. He says nothing. At 0745, his order reaches the Tone's plane. Ascertain ship types and maintain contact. He is buying time with uncertainty. He needs a few more minutes of not knowing because what he already knows is bad enough, and what he fears is worse. Yamaguchi does not wait. His flag signal to Nagumo arrives minutes later, written in the clipped directness of a man who sees the window and knows it is closing. Consider it advisable to launch attack force immediately. He is right. 16 dive bombers on Soryu, 18 on Hiru. Saying they are not a full-strength strike, some are still being rearmed. But they are aircraft that can be in the air within the hour, and aircraft in the air can find carriers before those carriers can find them. Yamaguchi's aviator's instinct has cut through the uncertainty to the essential fact. There is an American fleet out there. Every minute spent waiting is a minute it draws closer. Nagumo overrules him. Japanese doctrine requires a full-strength strike. A piecemeal attack risks the fleet without guaranteeing results. His returning Midway aircraft are already approaching, low on fuel, needing to land. He needs 45 uninterrupted minutes to recover his planes, rearm and refuel, and launch with everything he has. He orders the rearming reversed. Torpedoes coming back out. Bombs going back down. On 4 carrier hangar decks. So the ordnance changes direction again. At 0809, the Tone's plane reports 5 cruisers and 5 destroyers. No carriers. A breath of relief moves through Akagi's bridge. He has time. The situation is salvageable. At approximately 0820, a correction arrives. One of the ships appears to be a carrier. The rearming orders reverse again, weapons shifting on the hangar decks for the third time in an hour. The corridors below the flight decks are cluttered with partially rearmed aircraft, fuel hoses, loose torpedoes and bombs sitting in the gangways on trolleys, unlashed, unprotected, in proximity to everything flammable. Somewhere to the northeast, the American torpedo bombers are already in the air. They come in 3 waves. TBD devastators, slow, obsolete, unescorted, flying low and straight. First, of the 15 aircraft of Torpedo Squadron 8 from Hornet, under Lieutenant Commander John Waldron. Then the 14 from Enterprise's Torpedo Squadron 6, then Yorktown's Torpedo Squadron 3. The Zeros are on them before they can close to launch distance, and the Zeros are very good at what they do. All 15 of Waldron's aircraft are shot down. Torpedo 6 loses 10 of 14. Not one torpedo finds its mark. Not one. What the Devastator crews accomplish is this. They force the 4 carriers to maneuver violently for close to an hour, which prevents the rearming from completing. They drag the Zero Combat Air Patrol down to sea level and hold it there. The men flying those aircraft know what they are flying into. Slow planes, straight lines, no escort, the best air defense in the Pacific waiting below. They fly in anyway. They do not know they are clearing the sky for the dive bombers. They know what they are flying into. That is enough. At 14,000 feet, in clear tropical air, Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey is running out of fuel and searching an empty ocean for a fleet that isn't where it should be. Then, below him, a destroyer, Arashi, making flank speed back toward the Kido Butai after chasing away the American submarine Nautilus. McCluskey reads the white line of her wake pointing northwest, and he follows it. At 10:20, Enterprise's and Yorktown's dive bomber squadrons arrive simultaneously over the Kido Butai. The Zeros are at sea level. The 4 carrier flight decks are crowded with armed, fueled aircraft. The hangar decks below are scattered with loose ordnance from 3 hours of reversals. The sky above is empty. It is not empty for long. At 10:25, the specks appear above Akagi, above Kaga, above Soryu, dark points falling almost vertically out of the brilliant blue, growing fast. Kaga takes 4 hits. Soryu takes 3. Akagi takes 1. One hit on Akagi might have been manageable if the hangar deck below were not what it is. It is not manageable. The bomb detonates among fueled aircraft and scattered ordnance, and the secondary explosions begin, a chain reaction tearing through the ship from inside. The same on Kaga, the same on Soryu. The accumulated consequence of every rearming reversal, every delayed launch, every cautious decision of the last 3 hours, detonating at once. 3 carriers catastrophically damaged, approximately 5 minutes. 6 months of Japanese naval supremacy. 3,000 veteran air crew, the entire strategic logic of Operation MI, on fire. Aboard Yamamoto, 600 miles to the northwest, the picture takes time to clarify. The early reports are confused. Staff officers on Yamamoto's bridge are celebrating what sound like victories, sightings of damaged American ships, signals of success. Yamamoto sits quietly among the elation. He calculates. Then the real picture comes through. He fixes a steady gaze on his chief of staff and says, in a low, controlled voice, "Admiral Nagumo is going to withdraw." Not a question. Not a demand for confirmation. An assessment, the professional judgment of a man who reads his subordinate's character in fragmentary signals and arrives at the conclusion before the casualty reports are confirmed. He attempts to rally, and he orders remaining surface forces toward Midway for a night engagement. The battleships and cruisers, the surface superiority he still holds. Admiral Raymond Spruance declines the invitation. He pulls his task force east into the dark, refusing to expose his ships to a night surface battle against Japanese guns that outrange everything he has. The engagement never materializes. At 02:55 on June 5th, Yamamoto transmits the cancellation order. The maps of Midway's coastline are folded away. The officers who were celebrating 12 hours ago stand at their stations in silence. Yamato turns east, its massive hull cutting a phosphorescent wake through the black Pacific. 72,000 tons of steel, 46-centimeter guns capable of firing a shell 26 miles. The largest battleship ever built, retreating from a battle it never entered. One carrier remained. After Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu began to burn, Yamaguchi still had Hiru. He used her. 2 strikes against Yorktown. The carrier, Japan, believed it sank at Coral Sea, repaired in 3 days by 1,400 workers on Nimitz's orders, found her in the mid-afternoon and put her out of the fight. Yamaguchi's counterattacks did everything they could. Hiru was 1 ship against 3 American carriers, and in the late afternoon, American dive bombers found her. 4 hits, fires below, the ship unable to conduct flight operations. By evening, it was clear she could not be saved. Yamaguchi transferred command and ordered the crew to abandon ship. He did not leave. He exchanged sake cups with Captain Tomeo Kaku, who also chose to stay. And in the accounts that survived him, the stories Japan has kept of this man, he looked at the moon rising over the Pacific and said, "There is such a beautiful moon tonight. Shall we watch it as we sink?" These are the words as they have been remembered in Japan. Whether every syllable can be verified matters less than what they reveal about who this man was. A Princeton-educated samurai's son, named for a medieval hero who had seen clearly, acted correctly, been overruled, and in the end chose how he faced the outcome. He did not die raging. He watched the moon. Hiru sank early on June 5th. Yamaguchi was posthumously promoted to Vice Admiral. Each of the men at the center of this story came to a particular kind of reckoning in the years that followed. Nagumo returned to Japan. He was not court-martialed, and he was given shore commands. A more prolonged form of disgrace in a navy that understood exactly what it meant. In 1944, he was sent to Saipan as American forces moved through the Marianas. When the island fell, he died by suicide rather than surrender. He had survived Midway. He had not escaped it. In April 1943, American code breakers intercepted the itinerary for a command inspection tour by Admiral Yamamoto over the island of Bougainville. 18 P-38 fighters lifted off from Guadalcanal and arrived at Bougainville precisely as Yamamoto's transport made its approach. The architect of Pearl Harbor was killed by the same intelligence capability that destroyed his fleet at Midway. The same broken codes. The same men reading Japanese operational traffic within hours of transmission. And the weapon that reversed Midway was not spent at Midway. It was still there, still working, waiting for him. Joseph Rochefort, the man in the basement who made everything possible, was recommended for the Distinguished Service Medal in the immediate aftermath of Midway. His recommendation was blocked by bureaucratic rivals in Washington who resented both his methods and his success. He was transferred out of Station Hypo in the fall of 1942. He received his Distinguished Service Medal posthumously in 1986, 44 years after the battle, 10 years after his death. And then there is the Chicago Tribune. In the days following Midway, an American newspaper published a story that, in effect, revealed that the United States had broken the Japanese naval operational code. The Japanese intelligence apparatus, to which had been intercepting American communications aggressively throughout the Pacific, never detected the article. The same institutional confidence that led them to believe their codes were unbreakable kept them from noticing when the opposite was reported in print. General George Marshall, the U.S. Army Chief of Staff, was asked after the war to summarize what American cryptanalysis had meant at Midway. He did not reach for ceremony. He stated the fact plainly. As a result of cryptanalysis, we were able to concentrate our limited forces to meet their naval advance on Midway, when we otherwise would have been 3,000 miles out of place. 3,000 miles. On the morning of June 4th, 1942, Edwin Layton's prediction was off by 5 minutes, 5 degrees, and 5 miles. But that is the precision with which American intelligence had mapped an entire fleet's movements across the Pacific Ocean. The margin between 3,000 miles and 5 miles was a broken code, a fake water shortage, and months of grinding mathematical work in a basement at Pearl Harbor. The Japanese admirals said different things when the realization came. Nagumo read the message twice and said nothing. He bought time with a question to a scout plane, hoping the news would improve, watching the window close with each report. Yamaguchi said strike now, was overruled, and spent his last night watching the moon. Yamamoto said Nagumo was going to withdraw. Said it quietly, like a man finishing a calculation he had started long ago. And then, in the small hours of June 5th, Sei became the first combined fleet commander in modern Japanese history to order a full retreat. What each of them said is less important than the silence underneath it. The silence of a headquarters that assumed a warning had arrived and never checked. The silence of a scout plane that launched an hour late and found the American fleet too late for the knowledge to matter. The silence of 4 carrier hangar decks in the minutes before the dive bombers arrived. Crowded, armed, fueled, waiting. Yamato's wake stretched east through the dark Pacific. The battle it was built for never came. Its guns fired nothing. Somewhere behind it, on the surface of the ocean, the wreckage of 3 carriers and 4 carriers burned against the night, marking the place where the largest ambush in Pacific history had been waiting for a fleet that had already gone home.